Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Pennsylvania Association Municipal Managers Conference 2021. Welcome to my audio booth or my audio presentation here at the virtual booth for the conference. Obviously, a shame we're not able to all get together and meet in person. Apparently, we are able to start doing that with some conferences here in this fall. Apparently, I guess GFOA will be in September of this year in State College, so we're excited to see that. For those of you who were at the Pennsylvania Municipal League conference, you will have remembered that I did a presentation back then. This would be the COVID beard, and we're now hopefully the non-COVID beard. So we have added a few additional items, so it's not the same seminar presentation you would have seen back then. But again, the concept of what we're trying to discuss today is proper fiduciary oversight, especially when it comes to your defined contribution plans. And that's where we start our discussion actually from the National GFOA, where 2 years ago sent out this memo to all of its members, reminding them that they are fiduciaries to their defined contribution plans. Some states more so than others, Pennsylvania being one of them, where Pennsylvania actually mirrors the ERISA language in its statutes. But what the GFOA was, again, reminding you managers that the roles of a fiduciary, one thing you need to be cognizant of are the costs associated with your plan. They actually come out here and tell you or recommend that you should be monitoring those costs, comparing them to similar plan size and structure and service level of what you had. And that's really important, is that you understand your costs for the different elements of the plan. And those elements can be what the internal fund expense are, what the administrative cost for the TPA, and as well, if you have on-site education going, what kind of cost would be there. So those are really three different elements of the plan, and you as a fiduciary should be cognizant of those and understand those, and then also understand if there are any conflicts of interest. Does your provider spend assets, spend money working with a national organization that may influence decisions? So they come right out here and want you to be aware of any potential conflicts of interests and what those costs may be, and actually suggest that you are monitoring that on an ongoing basis. Next article or next piece we have in here for discussion piece is actually an article written by one of your contemporaries in the municipal management world, Ernie McNeely. This article Ernie wrote a year and a half ago for the Pennsylvania Municipal League in their sustainable magazine. The league puts out a quarterly magazine, and this particular magazine, everything was geared toward sustainability. Well, Ernie wrote this article, as you can see, called A Different Take on Sustainability, in which he talked about their plan that they had at Lower Merion, what they looked at with their plan from a expense standpoint, service standpoint, and what he was concerned is, as you may have heard him speak at Pelraz a couple years back, with the litigation going on for fiduciary oversight. We're primarily seeing that in the for-profit and in the nonprofit, especially higher ed area. But obviously there was some concern on his part what could happen in the governmental world should the plaintiffs' bar decide to train their eyes there. So the different take on sustainability was basically, if we're working on sustainable issues and we're not taking care of the core issues like fiduciary oversight, then we may not have resources to do some of those other things we want to do inside the municipality. So it's a great 1.5-page article. It will be posted in the room for you to peruse at your leisure and download it as a PDF fashion. One of the things Ernie went out to point out was, in their case, just in the savings to the employees, and this was based on the plan size then, so every year the plan gets older, which the assets continue to grow, that savings is even greater. But the initial savings just by making that change was over $55,000 just in fees, not to get into the specific investments and how much better they had performed than their original investment lineup. So that's what we worked with them as a independent third-party fiduciary. We work with many municipalities now, thanks to the work we do with the Pennsylvania Municipal League, in providing this oversight for these employers. One of the biggest areas of concern is target date maturity funds. Here is a notice that the Department of Labor put out 7 years ago, going on 8 years ago now, specifically referencing target date maturity funds and what an employer needs to be doing to ensure that those target date maturity funds are the employers meeting their fiduciary obligations in regards to them. And it's not as simple as, oh, this is what we have, we'll take it. The target date maturity funds are very complicated vehicles, and they have exploded in popularity. If we go back to, this is a Morningstar did this back, this analysis back 5 years ago. So they typically do these every 5 years or so. We expect this to be updated in the next year or so. But in 2016, there were over $880 billion in target date maturity funds. We expect that number now to be over $2 trillion. So just absolute explosion in these type funds. Right now, approximately 88% of all new contributions go to target date maturity funds, which represents a total of 35% of the total assets. So from a quote unquote, where is the money you're looking at on this target date maturity funds? As a matter of fact, just 2 weeks ago, you had two senators came out advising the Department of Labor that they'd like to spend a little time delving into the target date maturity funds because they weren't necessarily comfortable with some of the risks associated with the target date maturity funds. And we'll touch on that in the highlight from the DOL. But why is that? Well, this is an example. We looked at a bunch of different target date maturity funds. And you'll appreciate this a little bit more when we get into what the DOL is telling us we should be doing. And these are right in the DOL's messaging, providing you, as they say, a greater framework of these things we should be considering. These different bullet points here. Establishing a process for comparing and selecting target date maturity funds. Well, chances are you're like most municipal entities who brought in in essence, a product either provided by a company or maybe an RIA, Registered Investment Advisory, but in essence bought a product without necessarily understanding what you have. So the first thing the Department of Labor says you should be doing, and again, when the Department of Labor makes a recommendation, it's really not a recommendation. Those are the first things they're going to do when they come in and audit you, and then start racking up the penalties for you not adhering to their quote unquote suggestions / recommendations. So when right off the bat, establish your process for comparing and selecting target date maturity funds. Well, this is exactly what they're talking about here. It has a glide path, which I'm going to explain to you in a quick moment. But what type of glide path is it? Is it aggressive? Is it a moderate? Is it a conservative glide path? You have to come up with some type of weighting to determine that. Where is the equity starting point on that glide path? Meaning how much is in stocks? Like if you have the TIAA-CREF funds, you're at 100% in stocks when you start off. Or the lowest of any of these that we looked at was the Fidelity Freedom TDFs. Then ending point, what is the lowest amount in stocks when the glide path stops its descent? And as you can see, that ranges from 19% up to 50%. So again, being cognizant and understanding that, and where does that process start? How many years before retirement? And then at retirement, when does the glide path stop moving? So when the DOL says you need to establish a process of comparing and selecting a target date maturity fund, most municipal entities don't have the capability of figuring out a process to even do that. So that's what we do, is we come in and help you identify that process. And then they tell you you need to put a process in for periodically reviewing those target date maturity funds. Next, they want you to understand the fund's investments, the allocation in different asset classes, individual investments, and how these will change over time. So again, the key is what's in it. Kind of like Prego spaghetti sauce. We've all got target date maturity funds, but what's in that target date maturity fund? And you are responsible for making sure it fits your employee class. And that's, again, what we're looking at here is what that equity exposure is. So it's not equity exposure, it's the passive exposure. Glide path, you heard me talk about that already. So this is an example of what we mean by glide path. We see the starting point 45 years before retirement. So typically a 20-year-old, 45 years, now they make from 65. In this illustration, we're looking at retirement at 65 here. So where are our particular investments and what does their glide path look like? So the starting point, everyone was up here, and we see those lines start to fall, decrease, meaning our equity exposure is becoming less as we get closer to retirement. So what is the glide path of the target maturity funds you have? Then you have to answer the question, is it a to retirement or is it a through retirement? So for easiness sake here, for those of you who are colorblind, I apologize. But the top line right here, nice and lime green, we see at retirement, it stops its downward trajectory and levels off. That would be what we refer to as a to retirement. Or if we look at this reddish color here, we see it dropping, overlaps with a lot here, but then we still see it. Look at that, it comes through here and all the way through here. So we see that is, quote unquote, a through retirement. Our equity exposure continues to drop all the way through retirement. So we have to or through retirement in this particular case, that or that reddish maroon, I guess burgundy color through retirement. So understanding what our glide path is, again, very important. Asset class coverage, it specifically tells us we have to know what's in our target date maturity fund. Some target date maturity funds aren't created the same as others. So for example, that Fidelity Freedom Index, we see it's missing 3 asset classes here. Same on this sheet, we see TIAA-CREF missing 2, Vanguard missing 2. So you as the employer need to understand what's in the spaghetti sauce. And are we comfortable with it, what's in that spaghetti sauce? review the funds, fees, and expenses, just like the DOL or just like the GFOA had just told us we need to be doing. And then inquire about whether a custom or non-proprietary target date fund would be better to fit in your plan. What does that mean? Well, when target date maturity funds first came out, they were notoriously all constructed with the same fund company's investments. If the fund company did all of your investments well, all your asset classes well, fantastic. But it's that old adage, garbage in, garbage out. So if a fund company didn't do a few asset classes well, then your end product probably not going to look very well. So that's what they're referring to here, using a non-proprietary or target date fund. Would that be a better fit for your plan? And why does that become important? Well, when we go and we were to compare these funds, for example, what we would see is, when we're looking at each one of these, and I'll pick on American funds, for example. So here is the holdings of all the American funds. Well, what will we see? All of the investments are all American funds. And at the point when we did this analysis, we see quite a few of them, yellow flags, cautionary flags, versus red flags, which would be, in our ranking system, those underlying investments would have been removed from the fund lineup. So what we see that traditionally is many cases a proprietary fund lineup will have a lot of holes in it that are theoretically hurting your employees. So looking for a fund, if we're using a pure fund family, some difficulties in achieving that. As you can see, as we go through these, even Vanguard had a cautionary flag on one. Here, nice job, no flags. But these are all indice-based investments, as opposed to here is an example of a non-proprietary. We see BlackRock, Putnam, T. Rowe Price, ClearBridge, American Beacon, DFA. It looks as though about 12 different fund families making up that portfolio. So it's what we would call a best of breed, and this particular manager will change out those underlying funds based on criteria if they continue to underperform. So that's what we're referring to about proprietary versus non-proprietary, and deciding which is best for your employees. And then developing effective communication strategies. And this is really one of the areas where the senators, Patty out of Washington, and Patty Murray, and I can't remember the other senator's name, but there were two of them, literally just 2 weeks ago came out. One of the ways of minimizing the headaches with target date maturity funds is educating the employees on the things that the DOL wants you as fiduciaries to be cognizant of and be aware of. So that's where we come in, and again would help educate and design a communication package for those employees that are in the plan. Last but not least, for you members of GFOA, you may remember this was an article that I published for the Pennsylvania GFOA back in 2018, where we discussed the issues of being a fiduciary and any potential pitfalls that we might run into. In the issue with being a fiduciary are it's fraught with potential liability when you are a fiduciary, because as several court cases have pointed out, you not doing anything is as bad as intentionally violating your fiduciary principles, because as far as the Department of Labor, and again, you aren't bound by ERISA, but what happens and we have met. We just had this discussion this last week with a working group of ERISA attorneys and the plan advisor for National Association of Plan Advisors. Was if anyone was aware, A, of municipal entity being sued yet, and B, if not, why. In that discussion was no one was aware of a lawsuit yet. All felt that it was ripe to happen, but some states would shield better than other states. The consensus was about 37 of the states have language either mirroring ERISA or exactly ERISA language, Pennsylvania being one of the 37. So any of those 37 states are ripe for ERISA, like we saw in higher ed, because especially when things revolved around the fee structures of the plans not being anywhere near as fee competitive as the 401k side. And what I was referring to about as a fiduciary, not performing your duties is catastrophic because it's considered willful misconduct in the legal world. The Supreme Court has ruled in several cases, you, in essence, sticking your proverbial head in the sand doesn't cut it. Another area it doesn't cut it where we thought we were doing the good thing. So what we refer to as the pure heart but empty head defense, not viable defense for breaches of fiduciary oversight as well. A few quotes that came from some Supreme Court cases, as well as restatement of second trusts. When a trustee violates a duty because of a mistake as to the extent of his duties, he is not protected because he acts in good faith, nor is he protected merely because he relies upon the advice of counsel. So that's where your pure head, empty head comes into play. Even if you were advised this is okay, it doesn't cut the mustard. ERISA's reference to good faith is limited by the overriding duties. Fiduciary subjected to good faith belief of his prudence will not insulate him from liability. ERISA does not excuse a fiduciary's breach of duty because the fiduciary acted in good faith, or the fiduciary's subjective good faith belief in investment does not insulate him from charges that he acted imprudently. So you've got four different cases plus the restatement of trust, all spelling that out. What the Department of Labor by statute has is 2509.951C6, where it specifically states that unless a trustee possesses the necessary expertise to manage the investments, fiduciaries need to obtain advice of a qualified independent expert. That's where we come into play. We'll work with you to create all of the background that's needed, because as a fiduciary, you do not have to have the least expensive plan, the cheapest plan out there. You don't have to have the plan with the best performing assets. What you need to do is have a process put in place that you and your committee have looked at all of these different aspects, discussed them, documented them, and then created a plan going forward, which typically is not the case. Again, more as I mentioned earlier, more often than not, a municipal entity simply hires a provider, and then that provider gives them a investment lineup. That doesn't it doesn't come anywhere clear to cutting the mustard, as I pointed out with specifically the target date maturity funds, but the rules apply to all the other investments as well. What you want is, in essence, you hire a provider that is a empty shelves at the grocery store. You as fiduciaries are responsible for stocking those shelves, and that's the investments, if you will. That is the key to what we do as an independent fiduciary and how we operate and help you achieve your goals and, in essence, keep you and your municipality out of trouble. The required disclosures, we'll leave that up here for a quick moment. Thanks to compliance reasons, we have to put our wonderful disclosures up there. But that's all I have for you today. I appreciate you all coming by, stopping by the virtual booth today. And if you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to give me a call. Ernie will tell you, or many of other clients tell you, at any given day, I'm anywhere in the state, especially now that the COVID restrictions are up. And a lot of this last year, what's proven to be very successful is meeting with you and your investment committees virtual as well. So we can do live and in-person meetings as well as virtual meetings. It sounds like a lot, and it actually is a lot. But when you work with a third-party independent fiduciary, we help create all that framework. We actually do the heavy lifting, provide the education that you need, and then get your plans set up and running properly. So again, thanks for stopping by. If you have any additional questions, please come in, see me, or give me a call. Take care.